It's the 1900s. Iran was actually called Persia. It was run by these chop niggas, okay, the Qajar dynasty. Now what you need to know about these guys is that these guys were extremely secular, meaning that Iran essentially was secular and that you could basically be or freaking Christian, Muslim, whatever. They didn't care who you were, okay? And the women didn't really wear hijabs. There was a lot more sort of Western, what they'd say, freedom, all right? Drinking, clubs, partying, all this stuff. They were trying to make Iran kind of like the West. Now, the Qajar dynasty was also in close alliances with these three niggas, okay? Specifically, the US and the Brits. The Brits basically had a lot of influence over Iran's oil systems and basically had a lot of influence in how their oil was being distributed and controlling their economy, okay? But basically, Iran was having close alliances with these three people, okay? And we'll get into the state of Israel later. Now, in the 1920s, this nigga, Reza Shah Pahlavi, took over power, okay? And he basically became the leader of Iran. He basically was kind of like the other guy before him, where, again, he did try to reduce foreign influence, but again, he was still trying to modernize the country, make it kind of like the West, you know, women without hijabs walking around everywhere, reduce Islamic influence, and make the country more secular. Basically, he was trying to make it like Dubai. Even though Dubai comes much, much later, he was trying to be kind of like the first Dubai, okay? Very safe, secular country, you can do whatever you want, drugs, money, party, all that stuff. They basically keep close alliances and are chill with, you know, the United States, the Brits, and, you know, Israel, for example, even though that comes a little later, but you'll see what I mean. In 1935, this nigga also changed the name of Persia and officially called the country Iran. So in 1941, during World War II, this nigga actually had to step down from power because the Brits and the Soviets invaded Iran and he was just kind of forced to step down. So after that, his son, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, whatever, basically became the new ruler of Iran. But then in the 1950s, Iran basically elected this nigga into power, Mohammad Mossadegh, or whatever, however you say his name. Now this nigga basically wanted to do a few things. First is that he wanted to nationalize Iran's oil. Basically what this means is that he wanted Iran to control all their oil. He wanted to remove the British influence and the US influence and all that stuff. He wanted to basically lower the alliances with them. He wanted Iran to be able to control their own oil, choose who they sell it to, you know, why they sell it to, how much they sell it to, and be in control of their economy and stuff, and not rely on these foreign people. Now in 1953, the Brits and the US, they opposed this. They were like, oh my god, if this nigga actually gets this done, we're gonna lose control of all the oil in Iran. We're gonna lose our, you know, alliances with them, and their economy basically relied a lot on Iran's oil and trading with them and all this stuff. And they were like, we gotta get this nigga out of here. So the Brits and the US basically foreignly intervened in Iran in 1953 and literally funded and helped this nigga get back into power, Mohammad Shah Reza, however you say his name. Now this guy, obviously, you probably heard of him, and his name is the Shah or whatever. Now, what were some of the pros of him, and what were some of the cons of him? Well, the two main things that were good about him is, like, one, like, he was helping the economy of Iran. He was basically making these alliances with the US and the Brits, and he was playing nice with them, kind of like what Dubai and all these Gulf countries do now. And basically that was helping the economy over there. And also he was trying to make it a more secular country, you know, not really dominated by Muslim influence. You know, you could come here, do whatever you want, party, drugs, all that stuff. He was trying to basically make Iran like Dubai, okay, and basically turn it into the West. Now, the main criticism that he got and why a lot of people were against him is, first of all, this guy was huge on, like, his opposition, okay? So he was kind of like Kim Jong-un and kind of like the Saudi princes, where if you openly criticize them, you're getting your head chopped off, okay? They're gonna kill your entire family, and they're gonna make it look like an accident, okay? He was known for having secret policing, and he was very against people who opposed him. He was very, you know, against them. Times where he literally shot and killed tons of protesters who just protested against him. Another thing was that a lot of people consider him, like, anti-Islam and, you know, against religion. He had laws that were basically banning the hijab, for example, and he wanted to ensure that it remained a secular state and there wasn't crazy Muslim influence. A lot of people also consider him a sellout, kind of like what the Gulf countries are doing now. In the 1950s, Iran was actually one of the first people to recognize Israel as a state. So again, people are like, okay, why are you making alliances with the US and Israel and all these guys hate us anyways. They're oppressing our Muslim brothers and sisters in Palestine, for example. Why are you selling out? And why are you making alliances with these guys? And why are you dropping Islam and trying to make this place a secular place? But again, at the contrary, a lot of his supporters were like, we like the secularism. And he also like gave women the right to vote and stuff like that. And people were like, yes, freedom, yes, yes. And that's where all this argument comes from, where people say that this guy brought freedom to the country because he was just making it a more secular country with secular values, Western values, and not really Islamic values. Now, all this builds up to 1979, where the Iranian Revolution happened. Basically, people got fed up with this guy. Millions of Iranians hated him. They basically teamed up. They took him down, and basically this is when the Islamic regime started. Now, obviously, the leader of the Islamic regime being Khomeini right here. Now, the general pros of Khomeini were that, first of all, he was against the West. He was against Western influence. He was obviously against the state of Israel. And, this is where Iran really locked in and started, opposing Israel. And Israel saw them as a threat, And then the whole thing goes on with Benjamin Netanyahu. He goes, they got nukes. We got to take them down. Weapons of mass destruction. All this bullshit. And obviously, him leading up to creating the acts of resistance, Hamas, Hezbollah, Hezbollah. And he was basically against the West, okay? Basically an enemy of them, and he's like, these guys are killing our brothers and sisters in Palestine, we gotta stand up for this. So he wasn't a sellout. And then also he was pro-Islam. Now obviously you can go into it, he was a Shia, so then it's like all the debate of, was he really a good Muslim? That's a totally separate thing. But again, he did want to promote Islam and make Iran an Islamic state. He didn't want to have it all secular like the Shah. Now, some of the main concerns of him was, at first, people felt like he was forcing Islam on people, which he kind of did to a degree, because he had a lot of rules like forced hijab, and even now there was rules and laws about forced hijab, and if you refused to not wear the hijab, you would face like serious legal consequences and stuff. Also, the economy wasn't doing as well as the Shah, because again, he was playing nice with the United States and Brits and supplying them with oil and all this stuff, and this guy was kind of against that, so the economy was going down. And a lot of secular people and liberal people who just grew up in that life of just being able to do whatever they want just felt like they were being oppressed by this guy because they were having Islam forced down their throat. But again, if you were a Muslim during this time, especially a Shia, it's very good for you, because you're like, damn, yes, we love Islam and all this stuff. Also, for Sunni Muslims, they also felt kind of oppressed, because again, now they have to follow the Shia laws and stuff. And also, Khomeini and his regime also have random laws like muta marriages, temporary marriages, which if you're a Sunni, you're against, because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ forbade temporary marriages. And just a lot of things like that, where the Sunnis felt like they were getting oppressed. They also just had trouble building mosques and getting into positions of power. Khomeini was also kind of involved in some wars in Syria and other places which were harming Sunni Muslims, and a lot of innocent Sunni Muslims were dying. So yeah, essentially secular people and people who didn't really chill with Islam felt like the religion of Islam was being forced down their throat. Economy was kind of going down, and also Sunni Muslims felt like they were being oppressed. And this is the general reason why a lot of people, even now to this day, don't like Khomeini and don't like the Iranian regime and preferred the Shah and all that. But the biggest positive was, again, at least Khomeini was fighting back against the oppression of other Muslims in like Palestine, for example. He was standing up to the state of Israel, standing up to the United States, all that kind of stuff. And he wasn't a sellout like the other Gulf countries. Now, in the 1980s, after seeing the massive success of the Islamic regime movement and, these guys taking power and control in Iran, Saddam Hussein and the niggas in Iraq were kind of freaking out, because they're like, oh my god, what if these guys come to Iraq and try to do the same thing here? And Saddam Hussein, for example, was a Sunni as well. So he was like, damn, we gotta take these guys out. They're gonna come and invade Iraq and do the same thing to us and take over our regime and, promote the Shia Islamic movement. So yeah, now Iraq and Iran are fighting a war. They're basically fighting each other, and it lasted 8 years where both sides lost a lot of people, but in the end it actually affected Iraq more and hurt their economy more, and it's part of the reason why they ended up invading Kuwait, and then we know the rest of the story. But they were able to some sort of like peace treaty or deal, whatever, and they stopped the war. And that pretty much takes us to today. That's pretty much what you need to know generally about the history of Iran. Of course, this is a very wacky breakdown of it. I've probably missed a few things. I just noticed I made a few mistakes as well. Yeah, that's the general history of Iran and what you really need to know about the Shah over here and Khomeini over here. And you'll see a lot of room temperature IQ people who grew up despising the Ayatollah, and Americans say that Islam was the reason that Iran got destroyed and all that stuff, and that's just stupid. Is Khomeini really the best example of Islam? Did he really follow the Quran and Sunnah to a T? It's like saying that the United States is a Christian country, yet you have OnlyFans whores walking around, and all the leaders are involved in the Epstein files. But yeah, generally, Khomeini, a lot of his supporters, they support that he was against the US, Israel. He actually fought back. His regime right now is literally the only one that's fighting back right now. They support that he at least promoted Islam, wanted it to be the national thing of Iran. But then people who oppose him say that he kind of forced Islam onto people. He hurt a lot of Sunni Muslims by also forcing his version of Islam on them, and also, you know, being involved in wars like this Syrian war and all this stuff. Yeah, that's why a lot of people actually support the Shah, because he was very secular, promoted a lot of Western ideologies of freedom and all that stuff, and he was helping the economy of Iran grow. Again, you'll see more room temperature IQ Iranian women right now dancing in the USA that Khomeini is dead, and they have an OnlyFans account, and they're talking about freedom. Like, nigga, what? But yeah, that's the general history of Iran. Of course, it goes much deeper into this, and I did butcher up a lot of information in this video. But yeah, I hope you learned a lot about Iran, and yeah, thanks for watching.